said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is madness, and what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. Um, Again, we're just seeing more things that are meaningless. But one thing that I really want to kind of reiterate is in that verse 3 where it says, I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guided me with wisdom, which reminds me of a place in the New Testament where I think it's Paul. And he says, if it's not Paul, I'm sure I'll be corrected, where he says, I became all things to all men so that I might win some. But whilst he says that, he also says he didn't lose any of his values. He didn't lose any of his Christian values. He still held on to them. And that verse 3 kind of reminds me of the same thing, is that idea that, yeah, okay, you might be trying to gain knowledge, or you might be trying to gain wisdom of new experiences, or to encounter people, or to spread the gospel, but not at the cost of, in this case, losing his wisdom, or in the case of Paul, losing his faith, which I think is really important, because I think quite often we find ourselves, young people especially, we find ourselves in situations where, we're in the pursuit of something, or we're trying to achieve something, and as a result of doing that, we kind of let go of other things that we feel maybe is not as important, or we just forget the importance of it and we just let it go. And I think, it's definitely good to hold on to that, to remember that it is possible to do such things and still hold on to the wisdom, or to do such things and still hold on to your faith. I think it's actually something we've talked about before on Praying Child, I think, but I'm not. Okay, my mum is nodding, so we have. But yes, so let me continue. It says, 4, I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this, my wisdom stayed with me. Again, that kind of reiterates what's in the 3, which is also, I said, is that bit that Paul talks about later in the New Testament. That thing that in all this exploration, in all this trying to seek pleasure, as this particular section is talking about, he still held on to his wisdom. And like I said, major key is the fact that it is possible for you to explore and find out and discover and not let go of the values of the things you're supposed to hold on to. And, it ties in very well with Proverbs, because it does say, try as much as possible to get the wisdom, to get the knowledge, but make sure you hold on to it. I think also in Proverbs, it also talks about buying the truth and selling it not. Going to all extents to having the truth, but making sure you're holding on to it. You're not selling it. You're not giving it to anybody. I'll continue verse 10. It says, I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done, and when I had what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. I know I've talked about this before, because I remember focusing on the fact that Solomon basically had it all, did it all. Anything there was to be done, he did it. And yet, after achieving everything, he still said it was meaningless. It was like a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. So there was really no point in all of it. And, I don't really think I need to repeat myself so much, because like I said, I know I've definitely talked about it, but it's just kind of, again, a reminder, especially for us as young people, that we're always in the pursuit of all these worldly things, that you can still go and pursue all of it, but it really does come to nothing at the end of the day. And if Solomon isn't the best example of that, then I really don't know who else is. I'm going to continue. It says, verse 12, it says, then I turned my thoughts to consider wisdom and also madness and folly. What more can the king's successor do than what has already been done? I saw that wisdom is better than folly, just as light is better than darkness. The wise have eyes in their heads, while the fools walk in the darkness. But I came to realize that the same fate overtakes them both. Then I said to myself, the fate of the fool will overtake me also. What then do I gain by being wise? I said to myself, this too is meaningless, for the wise, like the fool, will not be long remembered. The days have already come when both have been forgotten. Like the fool, the wise too must die. And reading that reminds me of Topper's message at Soul Food. And I don't know if anyone's going to be proactive enough. They could probably like link it in one of the comments on any of the platforms. But she, in her message at one point, she talks about like celebrities, some celebrities that have come, they've done their thing and they've died. And I think she specifically talked about like Michael Jackson. And she said at the end of the day, everything that he's achieved, you know, no matter how great we might see it in this world, it really amassed to nothing. Like he died and then that was it. And reading that kind of reminds me of it because although like maybe wisdom may not necessarily be equated to wealth, but wisdom is a very, very important thing to have. And Solomon, obviously in all his wisdom, is really saying, okay, well, I just realized, hold on a minute, the fool and the one that is wise, we're still all gonna die. Like everybody dies in the end, which is something that I always say, like in the house. I'm like, well, everybody dies in the end, because no matter what kind of life it is that any one of us have lived, we are all going to die, which is, you know, obviously the realization that he's had here, that again, it's like everything is meaningless. Everything still comes to an end. We're all going to die. And, you know, despite the fact that we've all had different lives, despite the fact that we've all done different things, despite the fact that one might be wise and despite the fact that one might be a fool, we're literally every single one of us, we're all going to die. And it's just the reality that we have to deal with. Now, does this mean to say that we should now not be in the pursuit of wisdom? That's definitely not the case. But it's understanding that, well, I think it's more than one thing here. It's also a matter of intent, because quite often we seek things, we go looking after things, but only for our own personal gain and only for, you know, for it to look good on us or for us. And I think that's really where the difference is. It's like, you know, imagine constantly being in the pursuit of wisdom just so that you can shine amongst the people that you work with, or in school, or anywhere that you go, or just so that, you know, if you end up being on any social media platform, just so that people can look at you and go, wow. And if you know, dedicate yourself to that so much, at the end of the day, you're still going to die, and you've done it for what? If you are in the pursuit of wisdom for the purpose of which it does talk about in Proverbs, then I think that's a different thing entirely, because that's a God-given wisdom. That's the wisdom that, you know, is really, I'm going to say, priceless. You really can't get anything else quite like it. And I think going after that is doing that in regards to the instructions that God is giving you, and not necessarily for your own personal gain, which is, in fact, coming to think of it, even the previous things that we've come across, all the things that Solomon has kind of done, like, you know, he says, oh, he bought female slaves, he had this, he had that. That was all for himself. It really wasn't for anybody else. And it wasn't to justify God or anything like that. It was just for his own personal gain. And I think that's why it kind of buttresses the fact that it really is all meaningless. So you imagine you're doing all of this and you're just going to die, and you can't take it with you. It doesn't do anything for you. So what's the point? Yeah, I'm going to continue. I think I'll continue from verse 17. It says, so I hated life, because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun, because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish. Yet they will have control over all the fruit of my toil, into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. So my heart began to despair over all my toilsome labor under the sun. For a person may labor with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, then they must leave all they own to another who has not toiled for it. This too is meaningless and a great misfortune, which again, is literally what I just mentioned. It's that thing that, you know, you've worked so hard, you've got all of this stuff, and then you will die, and then it might be passed on to somebody else, and you don't know what they're going to do with it. You can't come back to earth and check on what's happening to your riches or any of the stuff that you've amassed in the life that you had when you were alive. That's it. You can't go back. And that, again, like I said, that's the realization that obviously Solomon must have had here, that wait, I've got all of this, I've worked so hard for it, and that's it. It's all going to go to waste, or it's going to go into somebody else's hands, and I don't know what they're going to do with it. So verse 22, it says, what do people get for all the toil and anxious striving with which they labor under the sun? All their days their work is grief and pain. Even at night their minds do not rest. This too is meaningless. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. Working so hard for something, not having rest, your body is aching, maybe you have a headache, all different types of things, all because of hard work. And again, Solomon says it's meaningless, because what does it come to? 24, a person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. This too, I see, is from the hand of God. For without him, who can eat or find enjoyment? To the person who pleases him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. But to the sinner, he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth to hand it over to the one who pleases God. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. And this is really, 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 really where I'm going. This is literally the message in a nutshell. I'm still going to continue reading though, because we see this, the particular verse that we see again and again and again is 24. And I think it's important that we see it again and again and again and again, because one thing that I've always said, which my mum has said that I've just stolen from her, is that if you see something being repeated in the Bible, like one after the other, know it's something of importance. And the main thing is, despite the fact that, you know, Solomon has established that literally everything is meaningless, like nothing has value, nothing's really important at the end of the day, he now actually says a person can do nothing better than to eat, drink, and find satisfaction in their own toil. This too, I see, is from the hand of God. And that is really where I'm going, because like I mentioned earlier, when I said about, you know, you might be seeking wisdom, but what is your intent? For what purpose are you doing it? If it's for your own personal gain, then forget it. But if you're putting God on the forefront, and if you're, you know, just obeying the word of God, then really and truly, there isn't really a problem in what you're doing. And this section of chapter 2 supports that, because it says, he says that this too I see is from the hand of God. So this whole eating, drinking, finding satisfaction in your own toil, that's a thing that you can do because it is from God. Like, God has given you the ability to enjoy these things. And I think that's something that we really overlook. Like, a lot of us, we spend some, I can't tell you how many of my friends that I know that have literally worked day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out, long shifts, just so that they can buy one thing or the other, or just so that they can go on holiday, or just so that they can do this and they can do that and they can do this. But they haven't really got to enjoy life. They haven't really got to enjoy the fact that they have the ability to eat and drink and even find satisfaction in the work it is that they're doing. That is a gift from God. God has actually given that to you, and that is something that we're supposed to enjoy. It's actually not something that's supposed to be like, you know, we're suffering for. It's literally just a whole, it's like in quite a lot of phrases that we have, like about living today like it's your last day or whatever, like just enjoying basically whatever moments it is that you have. Because linking to what my brother talked about yesterday, which my mom actually, you know, kind of conjoined the two together when I was talking to her about this, is that the fact that every time you wake up, that's another day, that's another chance, that's another ability to, you know, do the things that God wants you to do. We were in the book of Titus today, and in Titus 3 it talks about how basically through the kindness of our Savior, we were given the ability to be kind to others. We wake up every day to have that ability to be kind to other people, to be generous to other people. It also talks about meeting urgent needs. it's all part of the things that God has allowed us to enjoy. I mean, who doesn't enjoy, well, there are some people, I guess, but on the whole, there's who doesn't really enjoy being nice to others? Who doesn't enjoy meeting the needs of other people? And it was just something that it made me think, wow, like, it's just that whole thing of actually, is it when, I think the phrase goes, sitting back and smelling the roses? Like, I think that's literally what this Bible verse is actually getting at, is just enjoying what it is that you have. God has given this to you, so by all means enjoy it. And if Solomon is even saying this after he said that everything is meaningless, then he's realized that, okay, despite the fact that I amassed all of this stuff, despite the fact that I have the wisdom, I have the wealth, I have all these women, I have all this cattle and probably properties and all this other stuff, he realized that really the truly simple things that are there for my enjoyment are to eat, to drink, and to find satisfaction in my toil. And then in that 20, I think it's 25, it says, for without him, who can eat or find enjoyment? And again, linking back to what I was saying about the intent. So if you understand that this has been given to you by God, you will also understand that you won't be able to enjoy these things without him, because God is the one that has given it to you. So how can you eat or find enjoyment in these things if you don't have God? Which, like I said, goes back to that intent. If I'm going to seek the wisdom or the wealth or whatever for the purpose of myself, then it's definitely meaningless. But if I now put God into it, that, you know, I'm doing these things and I'm grateful for God giving me this ability to eat and to drink and to work, then I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to be grateful. I'm going to be happy that, oh, look, I've had another day and I've had another opportunity to do these things. And like I said, I think it's something that's seriously overlooked. In fact, I can't tell you how many times I've read the book of Ecclesiastes from chapter 1 to chapter 12. I can't tell you how many times I've listened to it over and over again. And I've always been aware of the, okay, yeah, like God has given this to you, but I've never really kind of sat down and thought about it in the sense that, wait, we have been given these things. We have been given the freedom to eat and to drink and to enjoy our hard work, because God has given that to us. And like I said, it's just sit back and smell the roses. And I think that's just a really nice thing to say, especially when you consider, you know, some of the stories and some of the things that we read about. And also I was thinking that on Praying Child, I feel like things sometimes get really, really deep and really intense. And even Fortress's message alone yesterday was quite deep and intense. So I felt like I needed to come here and just kind of talk about something a bit more gentle and actually make sure it is gentle, because I know my mom has sat here countless times. She's like, yeah, I'm going to do something relaxed today. I'm going to do something not so intense. And it always ends up being intense. So I just really wanted to come through with something that isn't so intense and is actually quite, I think is quite sweet to the ears. And I think it's a form of reassurance, understanding the fact that, you know what, it says a person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. This too, I see, is from the hand of God, for without him, who can eat or find enjoyment? I'm going to continue with that 26. It says, to the person who pleases him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. I think that kind of also ties in with the intent. If you're seeking God, going back to Matthew, where it says, seek ye first the kingdom, I think it's Matthew 6, seek ye first the kingdom. If we're, you know, honoring God, if we're obeying his commandments, then obviously we're pleasing him. So if we please him, he's saying he's going to give us wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. But then it says, but to the sinner, he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth to hand it over to the one who pleases God. Again, I think I've talked about this verse, but I think in light of everything, I think it kind of, it ties in really, really well. For me, again, it's going back to that intent. When we are going out to work all the time, when we are, you know, constantly in search of money, or how we're going to get money, or how we're going to get properties, or how we're going to buy this car, or all of this, and it's not to please God, it's not with the intention of God in our hearts. If that's not there, then essentially we are the sinner. We are the sinner that he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth to hand it over to the one who pleases God. And, you know, it makes me think that how many of us, I'm talking about young people here, so, because my mom's always say talk about young people. How many of us have worked so hard for something and found that nothing has really like been produced, like nothing, you don't really have anything to show for it, because all these other maybe bills or like taxes and all this other stuff has come out of it, and you're actually left with nothing. And it makes me wonder that, you know, some people would have gone through that for like a very long period of time, and is that happening for a reason? Is it because you're not putting God first? Is it because you're not pleasing God? Like, there's things that we definitely have to question about our lives. Like, so often we want to put things on the devil, and we want to put things on it's the enemy, but sometimes we are actually our own enemy. Like, we're the ones doing ourselves. So, you know, reading that definitely made me think, because a lot of things in this life are kind of like a chain reaction. It also kind of reminds me of where it talks about the Lord's Supper. Yeah, and how if you take it and you haven't actually repented of the things that you've done, you might actually have sickness. And you know, how many of us have taken it and then we haven't actually repented when we took it, and something is happening to us afterwards? We're not feeling well, we are getting sick, and we read, oh, it's the enemy, oh, it's the devil. But really, you did it to yourself, but because, you know, it says, my people do for lack of knowledge and not knowing the scripture. So, you know, it's definitely a food for thought. There's so many times I've heard people talk about, oh, I've worked so many hours, and the money's literally gone. Like, there is nothing that they actually have to enjoy. And, well, it makes me wonder, okay, but what if you were actually pleasing God? Would that still be the case? What else? Yeah, and the other thing that I want to add to that, and I think that's what I talked about the last time I mentioned this verse, is obviously where it says is you're storing up wealth to hand it over to the one who pleases God. So it's kind of like a weird circle in the sense that, yeah, you know, it's still going back to the person that pleases God, which is exactly what is mentioned in the verse before, where, you know, it says God gives to the person who pleases him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. And then obviously to this, when it now talks about the inverse, the sinner is going to have the task of still giving to the one that is pleasing God. So really kind of emphasizes which side you really want to be on. You want to be on the side that is pleasing God. You want to make sure that all the things that you are doing is to glorify God, and you're having God's intent as your intent. Yeah, I think that's really the best way to describe it. And the other thing also, I was thinking about when I read that particular bit as well, because like I said, I feel like this is just a way of saying, you know, sit down, smell the roses, enjoy what it is that you have. I don't know how long ago it was that my mum still spoke about when it comes to half term. Funny enough, it is half term as well. When it comes to half terms or holiday, quite often that's when churches tend to do events, or that's when, you know, parents seem to be working the most, whatever. And I realized that, you know, where God is even saying what a person could do nothing better than to eat, drink, and find satisfaction in their own toil, it made me think that, so really, when these half terms are here, when these holidays are here, you should be making the most of the people that are around you at that time. Your children are now, like, you know, they're not going to school. They don't have maybe the same commitments that they would whilst they're at school. So they have so much more time. They're probably spending more time at home, possibly, probably. And it's making the most of that as well. And like I said, I think it just kind of tied in quite well, because it is half term, and it's buttressing on what my mum did talk about, that okay, conveniently, all these other things seem to be going on at the same time, but really, is that what we should be doing with that time? I feel like family kind of does come first, and time is really, really, time is of the essence. You know, there's you can't really guarantee tomorrow, so it's kind of like making the most of that. Like I said, you know, sitting down, smelling the roses. Although of course that verse doesn't necessarily say that, but I think essentially it is kind of getting to that. I mean, if you are eating and drinking, surely you must like sit down in the comfort of some place to be doing that. And also, quite how often do we eat and we drink, and we are with our loved ones, we are with our family, we are with our friends. And so, like I said, as I was reading that, you know, that's just something that came to mind. So I just felt it's something that I should share, because it's important. And I think if, like I said, if the Bible's talking about it, then it's probably something that we should hold on to. And then in chapter 3, it says there is a time for everything the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. What do workers gain from their toil? I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. Again, you know, when you consider, we've coming from the previous chapter, quite early on, we're already seeing the repetition. That same verse is there again. And I think it's very good that it even comes for after the whole, you know, a time for everything. Again, I think that's quite a popular section of verses, or there's a time for everything, there's a time for everything. I know so many people have probably heard that, and you know, it is from the book of Ecclesiastes. Another kind of well-known phrase as well is he has made everything beautiful in its time. But you know, going back to what I mentioned earlier, that time is really of the essence, and it's kind of realizing that there is a time for everything. So going back to like what I said in when you're eating and drinking and doing that with family and friends, like dedicating a time for that, like during holidays is really the best time for that, when a lot of people do tend to have that free time. And I just think it's important. No, I think it's funny that that actually comes after I've just said all of that, because it kind of does show you that there is really a time for everything. I mean, this list could probably have been longer, but it just kind of goes to emphasize that there's a certain time for each and everything, and there is you can do each and everything as well. I think it kind of allows you to realize that it's all possible. But yeah, like I said, going back to that, I think it's verse 12. I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live. Which is funny because I mentioned the Titus earlier, chapter 3, where it talks about doing good and kindness and all of that. So again, Solomon is saying, and I like the fact that the sentence starts with I know. So there's definitely an element of certainty here. He's not questioning, he's not doubting. He's saying for a fact that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live. And when you think about stuff like that, again, what are the things that make you happy? What are the good it is that you can do while you're living? And those are the things that you should do. And then 13, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. God has actually given you this gift. Funny enough, before we started, my father did actually ask me. He was like, oh, does it say somewhere where it says a gift from God? And I said, because it's repeated multiple times, I'm not sure if it does, but I said, I think it might. And seeing it, twice in a row, we see how, okay, God has given it to you. And here it's saying it's actually a gift. So what do we usually do when we are given gifts? What is it that we do? We tend to treasure them. We tend to be excited about receiving them. We're happy. We use them. And honestly, that's literally what I'm going to say. I don't think I'm going to go beyond this, even though it does say that same verse so many more times. But, you know, funny enough, talking about time is of the essence, and it's almost 11. So that 13 is really where I'm gonna stay put. That's the last bit, but I'm gonna combine the 12 and 13. I'm gonna read it again. Actually, I'm going to add 14 to it. So I'm going to start from 12. It says, I know there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it and nothing taken from it. God does it so that people will fear him. I think I also read that in another translation. So excuse me. Which kind of simplifies it. I use CEV. So I'm going to read that again from verse 12. It says, I know the best thing we can do is to always enjoy life, because God's gift to us is the happiness we get from our food and drink and from the work we do. Everything God has done will last forever. Nothing he does can ever be changed. God has done all this so that we will worship him. I'm going to Okay, that's better. No, I'm all right, thank you. And I think the CEV really just kind of, I don't know what the word is, compresses it, condenses it, simplifies it into plain English. And I don't really think it needs that much explaining. And I really kind of like the 14 that is added to it as well, because I feel like it kind of buttresses the fact that you should be enjoying life that God has given to us, where it says, because God's gift to us is the happiness we get from our food and drink and from the work we do. And like I said, food, drink is definitely things that I feel like we have associated with happiness. Like, how many people eat and are happy? Like, I'm definitely one of those people. My mood can easily change from the fact that being hungry to finally having food. And I'm sure it's the case for a lot of people. And also, even where it says from the work we do, and I know for some people, work may not necessarily give them happiness, but maybe the money aspect will. And then for some people, not both things will actually give them happiness. But I think here, it's actually something that we should, no matter the type of job it is that we have, it is something that we should celebrate. It's something that we should appreciate, because we do have the ability to work. And I think for me, maybe I will change the latter part of that sentence to saying about the ability to work, because that's definitely something to be happy about. There are people that cannot work. There are people that have to rely on others. We don't have to rely on others if you're able to work. And I think that's something to be happy about. And going back to the 12, where it says the best thing we can do is to always enjoy life. I think that is part of enjoying life. Enjoying what it is that God has given you, basically, is enjoying life. And like I said, it's not enjoying life as in, going crazy and doing whatever it is that you want and literally like break all the commandments it is that God is giving you. No, because like I mentioned a lot earlier, we saw how Solomon was doing all his discoveries and explorations. I don't even know if that's a word, but he was doing all of that, but he said he didn't let go of his wisdom. We see Paul as well, like I said, where it says, okay, I became all things to all men, but he said he didn't lose his faith, he didn't lose his values along the way. So it's not to now say that you should now go crazy in terms of enjoying life, because I know for some people, when you hear enjoy life, like that has a completely different meaning. But I think enjoying life in the sense that being grateful, like I said, when my brother talks about having that other day, like a new day, like every time you're waking up, being grateful for that, because it's another opportunity to do good. It's another opportunity to enjoy the gifts that God has given to us, and that's really priceless. If we're doing all of that and in the way that God wants us to, it won't be this whole meaningless thing that we see constantly going on in the book of Ecclesiastes. And I think that's exactly where Solomon was really getting to it, because when he says these things, he doesn't say it's meaningless anymore, because he realizes that these are the things that God has actually given to him or to us. And once God has given it to you, I feel like it can't be meaningless. There's definitely there's value to it. It definitely becomes priceless. It definitely means so much more to you. So yeah, I'm actually going to leave it at that, but I'm going to read it one more time in that CEV just as a reminder, because I'm not going to, the prayer things are not really my style. So, I'm going to leave it at these verses, and I'm going to say, do with it as you wish. If you want to turn them into a prayer point, I think it's definitely doable. And I think my mum has definitely done enough sessions for people to know how to turn Bible verses into prayer points. And also, if you just want to take the advice literally, then please, by all means, because I think it's good for young people to actually enjoy the life that they have been given, and not wait for a certain time, or not get to a certain point and look back and think, oh, I wish I had, because it's good to appreciate the God's gifts that he has given us. So yeah, I'm going to read it one more time in CEV. From verse 12, it says, I know the best thing we can do is to always enjoy life, because God's gift to us is the happiness we get from our food and drink and from the work we do. Everything God has done will last forever. Nothing he does can ever be changed. God has done all this so that we will worship him.